This is a podcast about our lived experience, which unfortunately includes infant death and subsequent mental health struggles. Please take good care of yourself and only listen if this content feels safe for you right now. We'll still be here when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Judith.
And I'm Alina. We are internet friends turned real-life friends who both experienced the tragic loss of our sons to sudden infant death syndrome in the winter of 2021.
In the year after Aiden died, my husband and I both became unemployed. My parents divorced, and we had to move 5 times for various reasons.
And as for me, just a few weeks before my son Quinn died, my then husband had come out to me as a transgender woman and we're subsequently divorcing.
It's been a lot.
It's been a lot.
But as long as we're living, we will love our sons deeply and work to make sure that we live a life that makes them proud.
Welcome to As Long As I'm Living podcast.
We're so glad you're here.
Okay, we are recording. We did it.
Excellent. You can hear me well?
I can hear you well.
Okay. So this week we're talking about faith.
We are.
And I guess religion and faith, 2 different things.
2 different things, for sure. So I think we should start with where were we pre-loss on this topic? Because we were in very different places. And then we can talk about what changed.
Okay.
Right?
Okay. First of all, I will say that I know that this is a topic that many of our listeners have feelings about because they've reached out to us about their journey in faith. And so I'm excited, nervous, but excited to have this conversation because I think a lot of people are working through this.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I have to give a caveat before I get started, though. Can I give a caveat?
Of course.
Okay. The caveat I have to give is that I am one Jewish person, not all Jewish people.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel, since many people that I know listen to this podcast are not Jewish, it's definitely intimidating to feel like I'm representing a religion that maybe people don't know in detail about.
Mm-hmm.
And so It's definitely I'm afraid. I think there's a piece of me that's afraid that I'm going to get it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to remind everyone that I am one Jewish person who is not an expert, who is just like a person.
Yeah. I'll also just say this is this can be a sensitive topic for people. And I just want to ask that you guys respect that we're kind of putting ourselves out there about this fairly sensitive topic. I mean, not so much, but for Judith, this is a very closely held belief. So I'm hoping that you guys can listen to this with the spirit it's intended, which is we're sharing what's going on with us after our loss and not we're trying to say anything about anybody else's experience because it's obvious.
Exactly. And I'm sure I'm going to get things wrong. So don't come out.
You know what though, Judith, you can't get something wrong because you're just sharing your experience.
I know. But one of the challenges is when you identify with the denomination, I grew up within the modern Orthodox denomination of Judaism. And I think it's challenging because I don't practice all of the things that maybe I once did. I don't practice what some people would consider orthodoxy or modern orthodoxy. So it's challenging because you certainly don't want to represent an entire group of people when you yourself are not practicing in the way that most people would maybe classified. So, okay, that's a really long caveat for me to say that where I started, I think about when I think about my faith, there are 4 buckets. I think you have to think about it as 4 separate pieces, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The first is God, the relationship with God. Does God exist? Is God and taking an active role in your life or a passive role? Where does prayer fit in? That's just between you and God. The second is between me and community, especially a faith like Judaism. It's so communal focused. My role and my involvement in my local community and my Jewish community on the greater scale has changed dramatically. I think the third is culturally. So not only am I Jewish within my community, but I eat bagels. There's a cultural component to Judaism that you identify with that has nothing to do with God or spirituality. And then the fourth one I would say is the rules and guidelines surrounding the Judaism that I was raised in. So some people, for me, I grew up eating only kosher foods. Many people who are Jewish are just as Jewish as I am. They don't eat kosher, they eat non-kosher foods, or they'll eat pig or whatever it is. So there are 4 separate buckets, and my relationship with each of those buckets has changed since Aiden died.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I could say like, oh, as a whole, like my faith has gotten stronger or my faith has gotten weaker. I think each one of those areas has changed. So I'll give you an example. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, of course. Please do.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk about community. So I was raised in a household that was very communal focused. Like, we did not think of ourselves as on an island. We existed within a community. All of our celebrations was within a context of community. Our mourning, my grandmother passed, it was in the context of community. Our social lives were in a context of community. Does that make sense? Or do you know what that means?
I know what you mean. So that, just taking as an example, Shabbat dinner, like every Friday you would have people over, right? You would go somewhere every Friday.
We would go many weekends we would be engaged. Yeah. And every Saturday we would go to synagogue and camp. Like, we went to camp with the same people we went to synagogue with the same people we went to school with.
You went to you went to a Jewish school.
I went to a Jewish school and I went to a Jewish camp, and it was all the same people. Or if it wasn't the same people, it was within the same denomination. So we just existed in this really closed ecosystem of community. And I grew up in a household where my parents, sat on boards and were involved in their local synagogue and, gave their time and their efforts towards communal activities. And so I, as an adult, I followed in their footsteps, and I, at a young age, volunteered at my synagogue, and I joined boards, and I helped start nonprofits for the Jewish community, and I helped with the construction of a Jewish facility in my old home, and I was like very involved. I would say on a scale of 1 to 10 of involvement, I was like a 9 from the minute I got into college. And then when Aiden died, like, I didn't have energy for anyone. I didn't have energy to solve anyone's problems, certainly not the community. Like, I just could not care less about my community. And it's sad because the community showed up for me, or they tried their best to show up for me, and I completely withdrew. I didn't go to synagogue anymore. I didn't go, I didn't participate in boards anymore. I didn't do Shabbat dinners with people anymore. I moved out of the community, physically moved out of the community, away from people. I didn't go to holiday services. My entire social life existed within a community, and just one day I kind of got up and left.
So I'm wondering if you would be comfortable sharing like some of the reasons why you withdrew.
First of all, I think it's really painful. Like, my community was so family focused. Everyone has a baby. Your friends don't have babies.
My friends do not have children.
They all have babies, and it was so painful. And to go to synagogue and see strollers, it's painful. And the holidays, I mean, just think about Passover. Like, the entire point of Passover is to share the story of the Exodus with your children. That is the point of Passover. Like, the Hanukkah parties are for children. They're not for adults. Like, every holiday is surrounded and designed to engage children. And to be the only person, and never mind the only person, just like all these things I imagined in my head doing with my son, it was just like glaringly obvious and painful.
It was full of reminders.
It was full of reminders, Triggers. And also, I just no longer felt that I had energy to listen to to think about other people. Like, part of it is living in a community is you give and you take. If someone had a baby, normally I would be the first person to sign up for their meal train. But now I didn't care that they had a baby, and I certainly wasn't going to make a meal for them. Or if someone got engaged, like, I would come to their engagement party or their wedding or whatever it was, and now I don't care. It was like I had to preserve myself, and by doing so, I had to shut off everyone else.
Yeah.
And that's hard when you live in a communal life, as opposed to you, who, like, you didn't have all these external people to think about.
I don't really have community in that way that I had to withdraw from. I of course had my family and, you know, my individual friends, but there was no like huge community of people surrounding me that I had to choose to engage with or not in the same way.
And I also think we're forgetting an aspect of like people looking at me.
Yeah.
People care tremendously.
Yeah.
And, you know, part of the beauty of living in communal life is that people are so happy for you when something good happens and so sad for you when something bad happens. But to be in the middle of a circle of people looking at you to see how you are, even if it's with the best intentions, it's hard.
It feels, I mean, I've definitely experienced that. You feel very on display because it's something that's so painful and raw, and you feel like you're naked.
Yeah.
In front of everybody, you know. You really do. Like it has an element to it of like shame when you have like a lot. I don't want to say shame. Like I obviously was not ashamed that my son died, but there was an element to it where it felt shameful.
Because people pity you.
They pity you. That's right. And there's something so taboo about, I mean, I also was getting divorced at the same time. Like there were so many things, and it just, you feel like you're walking around without skin. I mean, definitely without clothes, and sometimes even without skin. And so it's just too much to be around other people, especially as Judith said, her community was so children focused.
And I know people are talking about me,
right?
Not in a bad way, not in like a gossipy, like, did you hear what happened in like a bad way? But like, I know every person found out and called their mother or called their friend or called someone we went to high school with or called someone we went to camp with and said, did you hear what happened to Judith? Oh my God, it's horrible. It's horrible. That's what they all said. Isn't that horrible? I just feel so bad for her. She's such a nice person. She doesn't deserve that. Like those are the conversations that I know were happening. And it's hard to be that person.
The object of that. I completely agree that the idea, it like makes me feel, even just now thinking about it and how I felt at that time, like it makes me feel sick to my stomach that people would like send me a text message that said, oh my gosh, I heard about Quinn. I'm so sorry. And then like go back to cooking dinner. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm not faulting them for it. Like, it's okay. Like, that's what happens. That's life. Yeah. But like, I remember at that time, like receiving the text, feeling the warmth and love and support, and then knowing that that was it for them. Then they got to move on with their life. And so you're, you know, the more you're around normal, I'm using air quotes, normal people, the more obvious it is that your life is not normal, and it's very painful.
Or when they say, I hugged my children extra tight tonight.
Oh, I know. And it honestly, like, I hope that they do hug their children extra tight, but it doesn't, I don't know. It's hard to hear sometimes.
It's hard to hear. So, okay, that's the communal piece. So let's talk about the culture. Okay, now the culture, Alina, is interesting because I think there are times where you've told me that culturally there are things that you liked about Judaism. Like,
I have always really liked the idea of a lot of your traditions, all of your I think the Jewish faith has so many beautiful traditions. I love how involved, this is going to sound silly, and I hope that Jewish people listening understand how much respect I do have for it. I love how much you guys use candles. I think there's something like, it's like you guys really understand how to set a mood. I know it sounds silly, but you do. And I love that you set time aside for things. Like you really take the separation seriously of certain times are for this and certain times are for this. And you go all out like Shiva, like everybody is doing the same thing. You all understand that when someone dies, you're all going to do this thing. And I don't know that it necessarily provides comfort to the person who's actually grieving. You can speak to that. But like, I do like the idea that there's just like a separation that is understood.
I would say that it provides structure for other people to know what to do. And Shiva could be put into like the rules and guidelines section also, or the community section too. Sure. But let's just say like, you know, there are certain rituals that are done. Like this is what I normally would ask, like, and what rituals do you have?
And I would say none.
Because you grew up without religion.
Yes. So I guess I can go into that a little bit now. So I grew up with zero religion. And as I've come to be an adult, I've realized just how unusual it is, because there are a lot of people who as adults don't believe in any particular religion or follow any particular religious practices. But I do think it's fairly unusual to grow up without any religion at all. So my parents both grew up Catholic, but they were both kind of scarred by it. And they basically decided that they didn't want to raise me and my brother with any any religion at all. They were, if we were invited to church with our friends, we were allowed to go, but both my brother and I were kind of, we grew up in a very religious, very Christian town. It had like a million churches in it. It was a very small town, but it had like a zillion churches. And so we were proselytized to fairly frequently, my brother and I. Like, I think everybody like really felt terrible, like we were going to hell. And so they, we were like the only atheist kids in town. So like everybody was really trying to get us on board with Jesus.
Wait, let me ask a question. It's not, I want to make sure I understand. It's, you were raised with no religion and no God.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there was none of that at all. What I'll say is like, and I don't want to speak for my parents, but I would say my dad is kind of somewhat spiritual in that he definitely has a sense that the universe is looking out for him. And like, this is something that I honestly, like, I should talk to my parents more about this as an adult, because I do think it's kind of an interesting topic. I would say my dad is spiritual, believes there's like some universal, like some karma or something looking out for him, but not in any like denominational sense in any way, shape, or form. And my mom, she has a little bit of that too. And then she also, like, what she misses about religion is the ritual of it. So like she did really like the lighting of the candles at Catholic church. She likes like the smells of the incense, like all of that, like that part of it was really beautiful to her. And she misses that piece of it. But neither of them, I think they didn't believe. Like, I know my grandmothers, in particular, my grandparents, but my grandmothers gave my parents a really hard time about not baptizing me. And they were like, well, we don't believe it. So like, why would we do that? Like, it just feels like a whole.
But Alina, this is like a perfect example, and I don't want to get too far off from the topic.
No,
but I feel like this is a perfect example of like, okay, you don't believe it. My husband also, he's like he has real questions around faith. He doesn't really believe. He's not sure what he believes right now. But even if we didn't believe it, we would do it because
the cultural
of these
aspect.
The culture, the community, the ritual of it, because my grandmother did it, and my grandmother's grandmother did it, and my grandmother's grandmother's grandmother did it. So we have to do it. And my grandchildren will do it. So we can't like not circumcise. I mean, we haven't wanted to circumcise our kid, but we can't like not because we don't believe it.
Right.
Like, it's like, I think that's the challenge when these things are intertwined. Okay, one thing that we should talk about is cremation versus burial.
Oh, that is interesting to talk about. Yes.
And again, this is like cultural, but like it's not. We could just skip over culture for a minute and go to the rules and guidelines, because that's kind of where it starts. But in the Jewish faith, the decision that Aiden would be buried was made for me. It wasn't a question. For you, you had the option. It wasn't like, Judith, would you like to bury your son, or would you like to cremate your son? It was, we, Jewish people, do not cremate, although some do, and this is not a judgment. I would say traditionally, Jews believe in burial.
By default, you would bury.
By default, we would bury.
Yes.
And not only would we bury, but there are, let's say, 5 cemeteries in the city that are Jewish cemeteries. So like the amount of decision making that had to be done was very narrow, because obviously we were going to have a burial. Obviously it was going to be in a Jewish cemetery. The question is, which of the 5?
Right.
As opposed to you, where I wonder if you had to like wrestle with decisions.
I think so. I mean, we did to a certain extent. I think we both kind of, it was not a hard decision to cremate Quinn. I think both Kaylee and I want to be cremated ourselves. So that kind of made it easier. But I think at the time when Quinn died, like so little felt good. Nothing felt good. So it was just kind of like picking the least bad. So we did decide to cremate him, but it didn't really feel like a challenging decision. That said, there was the whole, like, which funeral home do we go to? Like, where do we get him cremated? Like, there were like 10,000 funeral homes in the city of Boston, like 10,000 different cemeteries where he could be cremated. And I remember my mom and my mother-in-law, one of them, I forget who, like had to research funeral homes. And then they spent all this time like putting together this list of funeral homes. And then I was like, this one. And it was the first one on the list. Like, I just like didn't care. Because like it was never going to be good. Like I didn't care. Like,
but what about the ceremony, like the service? Like,
yeah, well, we did not have a traditional funeral for him. This is one of the things we talked about this in the COVID episode, which I'll try to remember to link in the description. But we did not have a traditional funeral for him. If he had died like before COVID was a thing, we absolutely would have had some kind of memorial or funeral for him. But because it was January of 2021, which was still when COVID was like we didn't really even have vaccines yet. Like they had just started vaccinating like the first batch of people. So nobody was vaccinated. So we did a Zoom memorial. And Kaylee and I just like, I don't know, we just like made a couple of decisions of things to do. And I made a video of clips of him and we each read a letter and that was it. There was no religious faith-based component. Nothing at all. Just really nothing like that at all. It was just about our love for him and how much we missed him. And that was it. And honestly, like, I don't feel like I missed it at all. Like, I'm glad even if once COVID is fully in a rearview mirror, like I like the idea of a Zoom memorial. Like if I were to lose another baby, which hopefully I won't.
Well, that was so different from my experience because not only was the service completely kind of written out, but there was so much ritual around the service and also around, like we said before, the Shiva. I'll never forget, like, okay, so when you're in Shiva, one of the things that there are a bunch of restrictions that you're supposed to hold to. So
can I just pause quickly? Because I'm guessing some of our listeners have never heard the word Shiva before.
Oh, yes.
Shiva is the period of time immediately following the death, right?
It's a week.
A week.
It's a week. From the minute that the person is buried, it starts like a clock of 1 week. And during that time, you don't leave your house. You're not supposed to take like hot baths and showers. Like it's supposed to be a physically very uncomfortable time. You cover all the mirrors in your house because you're not supposed to like be vain. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what you smell like. It doesn't matter. You're just supposed to be in intense grief. And then people come and offer you lots of food, but they try and bring you words of comfort. And they just sit with you. And there are like guidelines around Shiva too. Like you can't just come into a Shiva house and start talking to the person. The person who is bereaved has to start the conversation. So if they don't want to talk, then you just sit there in silence. But part of it is that you don't sit on a normal chair. Like the point is that you're supposed to sit low to the ground, as if, kind of reminds me of like how I felt. I think this is the point. Like you just feel like a piece of shit and you just want to like lie on the floor. But like I felt that way anyway. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, you sit low to the floor. So there are these people that come to your house and bring you all of the things that you will need for Shiva. So they bring you a candle that's lit. First of all, there's this candle that's lit and you can't ever burn it out. And it goes for 7 days and 7 nights. It's like that big of a candle. And they cover your mirrors for you and they bring you the low chairs. And there's these people whose job it is to bring this stuff to your house. And I remember the guy came into the house and he put the low chairs in the living room and I would not let him in the house. I was screaming at him, get them out of here, get them out of here, get them out of here. Because I couldn't believe that it was me. Yes, I didn't want to sit on the low chair. It's hard. Yeah. It's hard. Like the ritual is comforting because it gives you something to do, but it's also incredibly painful. Like another reminder of like how horrific your life is. I want to talk about God. I want to talk about God. Yeah. And I want to talk about the rules.
Yes.
Part of the thing that I think changed in me is growing up, the rules of Judaism were definitely highlighted. I didn't grow up like Hasidic. I didn't grow up like really, I'm normal by all sense of the words, but definitely there were, rules in place about like modest dress or like I said before about eating kosher or Shabbat or whatever the rules were. There's like a rule for anything and everything. And I certainly did not follow all the rules before Aiden died. I mean, let's not fool ourselves. But I think I felt beholden to the rules. Mm-hmm. I felt like I was being judged compared to the rules. Yeah. And at the end of the year, when you get to Yom Kippur, and it's the Day of Atonement, and you're sitting there in front of God and in front of, reflecting on the year, like I would feel bad that I didn't do this or I didn't do that. And then this year I was like, fuck it. This is ridiculous. I don't feel bad because I was just trying to survive. Like, I am doing the unimaginable, and I cannot have any voice in my head aside from my own. And if my brain says to me, you want to go eat a pig, which it didn't, but if it did, like if it said like, this will bring you some measure of comfort, that is more of a priority to me than anything, because I was in so much pain and no one could help me. And having external voices in my head tell me what was right and what was wrong felt unfair. And it felt like they were designed for a different person in a different time. Almost like these are the rules for a normal human engaging in life. But I'm no longer a normal human engaging in normal life. So I think when it comes to like the rules and guidelines surrounding Judaism, I really stepped back in my level of observance, because I just couldn't hold those needs and my needs in the same headspace.
And like, just to highlight for our listeners who have not lost a child, you literally, like, just breathing, standing up off the sofa, putting some, teeny bit of food in your mouth, like those are Herculean, is that how you say it? Herculean tasks.
Yes. Herculean.
Let alone trying to remember all these other things. Like that's literally all you can do in a day. If you manage to eat something, you manage to drink at least 1 cup of water, and you sleep at night, like that's a win for a grieving person.
I don't really know much about other faiths, and I don't want to speak to something I don't know, but I will say that I'm curious if other people had the same experience. I know that many people speak about finding Jesus on their healing journey. I think it's interesting because my inclination was to move away from all these external voices.
But let me ask you this question though. When you say moving away from external voices, you mean the human voices in this whole community. You don't mean God, right?
No, I don't mean God. I mean the guidelines, the rules and guidelines about how to conduct yourself, which is different than God. So this brings me to, let's talk about God for a minute. Yeah. All of this is to say, my assumption, which was a very naive assumption, I don't think it was ever explicitly said, but I think it was implicitly said many times throughout my life, is if you're a good person, good things will happen. Mm-hmm. I think if you follow the rules, good things will happen. And 29 years of evidence had amounted to that. If I dress modestly, if I treat people with kindness, if I share and I'm honest, and if I'm all of these things, good things will happen. And then something bad happened. Mm-hmm. Something really bad happened.
The worst thing. Pretty much the worst thing.
The worst thing happened. I'm curious how I would fit that into what the narrative would be if I didn't believe in God and I didn't have laws and guidelines that were telling me what was right and wrong. I mean, Alina, how do you fit that into your head? How did you fit that into your narrative of good and evil? And
for me, I feel like I guess to expound on this a little bit, because I didn't really talk about my current worldview. So right before Quinn died, as an adult, I would say, if you had asked me what happens when you die, I would have said, you're gone. That's it. You're worm food. You get buried or you get cremated or whatever. And anything that you're doing, anyone that any survivor is doing after the person has died is just for their own comfort. And the person who's gone is gone, and they're gone, and that's it. And like, I've lost grandparents, and they're gone. I just feel that way. And so for me, I have always felt like it almost provides more, I want to say this right, for people, especially of certain religious faiths, it has always seemed to me like they behave in a good and moral way with the intention of their afterlife, being rewarded in the afterlife. And I'm not speaking for every faith here, but I do think that is something that happens in some faiths. For me, I feel like I have an obligation and a responsibility and a desire to be a good and moral person in my regular life, because this is all I have. So like if this is the sum total of my existence, I want to do something good with it. I want to be a good person in this time. I want to see good things happen to the people around me. So I take it very seriously because this is all I have. You know what I mean? Like I feel like for some people the afterlife is the reward, but for me, because this is all I have, this life is the reward. Like I have to make this a good life. Do you know what I mean? So like I think that's kind of where I'm coming from. Now, obviously essentially the worst thing in the world happened to me, even though I was, by all accounts, I would think, a fairly good person. And to me, it's just like, it was random. Like, I don't think it has anything to do with what I was or was not doing. I really don't. It's just completely separate. They're just completely unique circumstances.
This is what's interesting about how this fits in my narrative. You know, you get luck and then you lose a child and that's bad luck.
Yeah.
And I think I will wrestle with both. And I think that I can have both feelings.
Yes. Yeah.
The one area that I find that it comes in conflict is when it comes to prayer, because I really struggle with the idea of prayer, because it's like, it feels cruel almost. It's like, you want me to put myself out there and be vulnerable, but it doesn't matter what I want, because I get, you know, the question is, does it matter what I want? Like Alina, does it matter what you want if you don't believe in God? Do you know what I mean?
I do. I mean, so there are people who don't believe in God who do believe that like they can put their energy out there and manifest things. And I'll also say I am not one of those people.
Yeah.
That's not a worldview that I hold.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess no, it doesn't matter what you want. If you're just talking about, you know, thinking about it and asking for it to the universe or to a higher power or whatever, I guess that doesn't matter. I do think that there's something to prayer, or if you're not religious, meditation, and kind of just like allowing yourself to dress rehearse the idea of good things happening. I think that there's something really there that can be beneficial and maybe help make things happen. I don't know. I mean, these are all questions. It's kind of interesting because like as someone who didn't grow up with any religion at all, I have like little snippets here and there of various ones. But it wasn't until Quinn died really that I was like, what do I believe? Like I had never really been probed on that before by anybody. And I guess, so I'll say now, like what I believe is just like you were saying, where you hold this dichotomy. Yeah. I believe that when you die, that's it. That's the end of your life. I also know with 100% certainty that Quinn is with me all the time and that he hears me when I'm talking to him, that if I'm seeing something, he's seeing it through my eyes. And that doesn't make any sense. It does not. The worldview I hold, which is that when you die, that's it and he's gone, is not compatible with what I also know in my heart, which is that he's with me all the time.
So then why do you believe that when you die, you're done?
I don't have any reason to believe anything otherwise. I don't have compelling evidence except for what I feel in my heart about my son. Right. And so I think that it's almost like I had to come to terms with the fact that like I don't know. I don't understand any of this, right? Like no human being on earth knows what happens in the afterlife. Like none of us know that. I think what I know is that Quinn is with me all the time. Whether that is my grieving mother's heart choosing to feel that because it's less painful than believing he's gone, I don't know. But that is a way that I guess we can call it faith, has changed since Quinn died.
And what about your faith? Okay, this is another thing that we should talk about. What about your faith that things will get better, or your faith that more good is coming your way, or your faith, like, do you believe that there could be good in your life again? Do you believe that things will work out? Do you believe there's someone or something looking out to make sure that? If it's just luck, then how do you not know that you're just going to get bad luck over and over again?
I guess I don't know that. What I will say is I think we talked about this also in another episode. I think I'm more optimistic now than I was before. I think I because I have again felt joy, because I have laughed, because I have had additional good things happen in my life, like I think I have evidence that the worst thing can happen and that I can still rebuild. I also have a lot of faith in my strength to carry on now that I didn't have before. Like, I think I always would have been like, I don't know how I would survive if my son died. Yeah. But now I know I can.
That reminds me of what the rabbi said. And we can talk about rabbis. That's another story. But after Aiden died, there was one rabbi that I just really leaned on. And I'm not really a rabbi person, but this rabbi changed the way I think. And I had asked this rabbi, like, how do I pray ever again? Like, when I found out I was pregnant, I was like, I prayed for the last baby to live. I prayed for the last baby to be healthy, and the last baby died. So, like, why would I go through that same process again?
Put yourself out there.
Why would I, yeah. Why? And the rabbi shared that they're like, you know, you are putting a lot, like, you're not counting enough for yourself. Like, you're not giving yourself enough credit that, like, you can do this and that you can, like, right, you're not in charge of their health, but you're not giving yourself enough credit that no matter what happens, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Look at how much you've accomplished. Look at how resourceful you are. You don't need me or God or prayer to tell you that you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay because that's who you are as a person. And I really appreciated them saying that to me because, you know, I was expecting them to say, well, you pray, I don't know, because I don't know what I was expecting them to say, but to say, like, sure, you can pray if you want, if it feels good, but if it doesn't, that doesn't mean things are going to go to shit. It just means that you're not praying for it.
Right.
Because things are not going to go to shit because you are not going to let them.
Yeah. Gives you some, like, what's the word? I don't know, self-possession. Do you know what I mean?
Self-agency.
Agency. Yes, exactly. That's the word.
Agency. It gives yourself some agency. It feels.
So we really rambled here.
I think that this was like, I don't know. Doesn't this feel like the conversation that had to be had?
Yeah. Honestly, it feels good to have this conversation too. You and I have had basically this conversation before, but it feels nice to have it again.
And it was important to me that I had this conversation now before I lose this perspective, because I suspect my feelings about religion are going to change over and over and over again. And I think that for a lot of people, I like, it's easier just to write it all off and say, I don't believe it anymore.
Yeah.
I think it's harder but truer to myself to say, there's a lot here that I still love and I can believe in, but it's not going to be what it was before. I cannot have blind faith like I did before.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, I've said this to you, and I hope it is comforting. What do I know? I'm not religious. I don't have to wrestle with the same things that you do, but I do think that a God who loves you, like, understands your hesitancy and is going to be with you throughout all of that. Do you know what I mean? Like, you're still I don't know. I still would think he would be very proud of you, even if you're not doing all of that.
I think so. In Judaism, we talk about God as our Father, our King, like both, that dichotomy in itself. But there's the God that is the ruler that makes decisions whether you like it or not. That's the King part. And then there's the God that's compassionate, the God that understands, the God that is loving and puts your needs first. And I like to believe, and I've said this to you so many times, right? I said he fucked us so gently. Like, I like to believe that this had to happen, but on my days where my faith is strong, I believe that God did it in the most kind, gracious, and generous way, and that restores my faith. Like, there are so many times where I can look back and, the night before Aiden died, we weren't even supposed to be home. Like, we were supposed to be at this concert, and like, there were just so many little things like that where it was like, I think I cannot say that I cannot just walk away 100%. There's enough good there for me to say, I'm going to wrestle with this. And I think that's the honest and truest answer that I can give, that I'm wrestling.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, for me, the honest and truest thing I can say is that this I want to say it hasn't shifted my worldview because I don't know that I am any more religious than I was before. I'm definitely not like religious as far as a religion goes, but it has shifted. It has softened my heart toward like things that I can't see.
Yeah, that's another thing. It's like maybe there's a whole world out there of people who are
Yeah.
dead that like live amongst us, and like we just don't see
Yeah.
it.
And in some ways, that's a really beautiful thing to believe in that I just didn't believe in before. So it's in some ways that's nice, you know.
Yeah.
I do wish that Quinn were here in my arms though, instead of in the ether.
Oh my God. Yeah, but he didn't ask me what I wanted. If God would have, if he would have asked me what I wanted, trust me, I have a list. And
can I ask you something?
Sure.
Would it be easier for you, or would you prefer, or does it not matter that your grieving partner were like? Would it be easier for you if I were also Jewish in the same way? Yeah.
I don't think it matters. You are by far the most respectful person when it comes to religion that I have ever met. Like the way that you go about my idiosyncrasies, there's some things I'm really strict about, and then there's some things that I'm not, and it makes no sense.
Wait,
and
I want to tell you a story.
Okay.
That I saved for an episode of the podcast, and I just realized I never told this to you. Okay, so I went to visit Judith and her husband back in January. You guys all know this. They invited me into their home. I arrived on a Thursday so that I would be there. They went out to pick me up on Friday after dark so that I was there for the Shabbos dinner. There was a whole beautiful ceremony. Judith's husband said a couple of prayers. There was wine. There was a big reveal of the challah bread that I wasn't expecting that startled me. Judith's husband like whipped a kitchen towel off of challah bread. It startled me. And then, before you eat the bread, there's a ritual around washing the hands. So, we went and I washed my hands and we did this whole thing. We had a beautiful dinner. And then, later that evening, you had gone to bed. Or I think you went to bed. And Judith's husband and I were both still awake. And I came downstairs and I was feeling like a little bit hungry. So I came downstairs and I went into the kitchen and I was like, oh, perfect. Like I'll have challah bread. So I went in and I ripped a piece of challah bread and I brought it upstairs and I was eating it in bed. And then the next afternoon for the Shabbos lunch, we again did the whole ritual of the washing of the hands before we touched the challah bread. And I realized my faux pas where I had just come downstairs and ripped a piece and brought it upstairs to my bed. And your husband, so sweetly, no judgment, he watched me carry it upstairs. He did not say anything. But I noticed that when we had the lunch, he had cut off the piece that I had ripped in my hands.
He's such a nice guy.
The dirty piece. I thought that was so funny.
God bless you for feeling comfortable in our home enough to do that. I'm so glad that you went and you took your challah. It was for you, and honestly, do you think we cared? We didn't care.
No, that's the thing. Like, and the thing, it's like so interesting. Like, it's such a different worldview. Yeah. The idea that bread would have anything special or otherworldly about it that you would have to wash your hands before touching it is just not in my brain. So it literally did not even occur to me. But your husband was so sweet. He just like let me carry my ripped piece of challah bread upstairs.
Well, I'm sure I'm surprised he didn't offer you something to eat, but I'm sure he was happy that you went and ate it. Like, I'm sure no one cares. We're not like that. But I think you're right. Like, there's something different about the way we do everything. It's just a lot. And I just think you're incredibly respectful. You don't say, like, Judith, how come you follow this rule and not that rule? You just kind of like let me follow half the rules on half the days and the other half the rules on the other half the days, and you never ask me any questions. And sometimes you will ask a question, and I just say, like, I don't know. That's what my grandparents did.
I remember one time I said, like, why do you do this? And you said, Alina, if you're going to try to figure out the logic behind it, it doesn't exist. And I was like, okay. And I have a lot of curiosity about it because I think it's interesting, and a lot of it is just like so beautiful. Like, I really love it. So
one day we'll have to talk about the jumping in the lake, but not.
Oh my gosh, yes, I would love to tell that story. This episode's already way too long.
Okay, the point is that I could have friends that are, but I am so grateful that I have you, and I don't think I need faith-based friends to help me.
Yeah.
I just need grieving-based friends.
Yes. And that's me.
And that's you.
Well, this was a meaty topic.
Meaty topic.
Very meaty.
Very meaty. Wait, that reminds me when I asked you around Christmas, I was like, so what are your Christmas holiday traditions? Like, do you go to church at night or do you go to church during the day? You're like, Judith, I don't go to church. I was like, what do you mean you don't go to church at all? Like, I thought you weren't religious. I didn't realize you didn't go to church.
Well, you were like, what do you do? Like, how do you celebrate Christmas? And I was like, oh, well, just to be clear, like, we don't celebrate Christmas. We just like do the food. We have like, we have some cultural traditions that we do, like some Italian, traditions that we do at Christmas time and all that, but it has nothing to do with religion.
And I think it like blew my mind. It still blows my mind. Like, it's very confusing to me. Like, when I talk to you about Easter, like I would ask you, like, what do you do for Easter? But you probably like just go to
don't do
lunch.
anything.
I don't know what you do. You don't do anything.
Nothing. I mean,
Nothing?
That's what I'm saying. Like, I didn't realize until relatively recently just how unusual it is to grow up without any religion at all. Like, I've probably been to church fewer than 10 times in my whole life.
Do you feel like you missed like some of the pomp and circumstance of?
Nope. I don't feel like I missed it at all. I think there was no context where I was going to wind up Jewish, so I'll just say that. But I do think like a lot of the Christian, I'm much more exposed to the Christian side of things, and I think that it has caused a lot of harm to some of the people that I'm close to. So I personally I think it's. I don't want to disparage in any way because I know it also brings a lot of people a lot of comfort, but it just I think that the potential for harm is so great with some of these organizations that I don't feel like I missed out on anything, honestly. Like, I feel like I escaped something in some ways.
Yeah, and you can always have my challah bread.
To all of our wonderful new friends, we want to hear from you. Email us at aslongasimlivingpodcast@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram at aslongasimlivingpodcast. We'll get back to you as soon as our grieving brains allow.
Yay!